by Senator Jack Reed, Senator Olympia Snowe, and I, and many others, are working hard so that at the very, very least we can level fund LIHEAP so that nobody in our country goes cold this winter. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk call the roll. The Senate.
Mr. Akaka.
Without objection. And consent to speak as if in morning business. The senator is recognized. Mr. President, in the school year 2009 and 2010, the U.S. Department of Education provided $132 billion in grants and loans to students. That was up from $49 billion in 2001, a dramatic increase in federal aid to education. A large part of this increase can be traced to one particular type of school, enrollment at for-profit colleges. That has grown faster than any other sector. Currently, about 10% of the students pursuing education after high school attend for-profit schools, for-profit colleges and different training schools that offer certification in certain skills and certain professions. 10%. But that 10% portion of students in America account for 25% of all the federal aid to education. In other words, dramatically more money is going to those students than those attending other schools after high school. And when it comes to the student loan defaults, where college students borrow money to go to school and then fail to pay it back, for-profit school students account for 44% of the student loan defaults in America. 10% of the students, 25% of the federal aid to education, 44% of the student loan defaults attributable to for-profit schools. The industry is dominated by 10 publicly traded for-profit companies. And of those 10 companies, they enrolled almost half of the students in for-profit schools. So it's dominated by the big players. The largest, of course, the Apollo Group, University of Phoenix, at one point had over 450,000 students enrolled nationwide, more than the combined enrollment of all of the Big Ten colleges and universities. A big player when it comes to higher education, and a big player when it comes to federal aid to education. The Apollo Group, University of Phoenix, receives more money than any other college in America, far and away. None are even close. And the next two schools, when it comes to federal aid education, are also for-profit colleges. While federal spending on student aid has seen a huge increase, there has been very little accountability when it comes to these for-profit schools. Worse yet, almost no information has been available about whether or not the students are actually learning and finding work in their respective fields after graduation. In June of last year, Senator Tom Harkin, who has joined me in this effort to look closely at for-profit schools across America, added his name to a letter that we sent to the General Government Accountability Office to study the outcomes for students attending for-profit colleges. The report has been formally released. For-profit colleges serve, and you could argue they target, primarily low-income, non-traditional, and minority students. For-profit colleges often claim that the reason why more of their students can't find jobs and the reason why more of their students default on student loans is because they are trying to provide education to students that others won't accept. That's their explanation for higher debt levels and higher default rates and poor student outcomes. And so Senator Harkin and I wanted to ask the Government Accountability Office straight out, take a look at the different students in terms of their income and background and compare outcomes, for-profit schools versus public universities and private schools. Our question was, what does the research show about graduation rates, employment outcomes, student loan debt, and default rates for students at for-profit schools compared to those at nonprofit and public schools, taking into consideration different student backgrounds? When looking at student debt, one study found by the GAO that 99% of for-profit college students took out loans, almost all of them. What's the comparison? 72% of those attending public colleges took out loans. 83% of those attending private nonprofit colleges. So when it comes to student loans, the for-profit colleges lead all types of schools and universities in the number of students who are taking out loans. The GAO found that for-profit college students have higher rates of unemployment when it's all over. When it comes to loans and debts, students at for-profit colleges fare much more poorly than their peers attending nonprofit or public institutions. Students at for-profit colleges took out more student loans and they generally had higher loan debt. Let me tell you about one of those students who contacted our office. His name is Jacob Helms. He attended a for-profit online school to earn a Bachelor of Computer Science degree in video game design. When he enrolled, he was a little bit apprehensive because of the cost. You see, this for-profit online school told him that he had to take about 9 classes a year, and each class would cost him $1,500. Jacob was concerned about the cost, but the school told him, don't worry about it. That loan, the loans that you have to take out, will cover your entire education. With that assurance, Jake enrolled 4 years ago. After about 4 years of attending courses year-round, Jake reached the maximum direct loan amount for independent undergraduate students. He had borrowed $57,500. The problem was he wasn't finished. He hadn't completed his required courses. He'd just run out of the ability to borrow any more money from the government. Jake is $57,500 in debt. He has no degree and no job prospects. He says all he wants to do is move forward and start a career, his original goal. Jake says the school will provide him with no assistance or alternative other than to drop out with a debt, no diploma, no job. In fact, Jake didn't even know he'd reached the maximum level on his federal direct loan limit. He was withdrawn from online classes with no explanation and finally determined that since he could no longer borrow money from the federal government, he was at the top, $57,500, they didn't want him. When he inquired, the school told him he'd run out of money. With an annual income of less than $20,000 and no other way to pay the tuition, Jake just dropped out. He said the school's attitude was very clear. We got our money, we're done with you. Jake is not alone. Student debt has outpaced credit card debt. Imagine that. In October of last year, 13 months ago, for the first time in history, the total amount of student loan debt is greater than credit card debt in America. In 2009, the average debt nationally for students at for-profit colleges is well above those who attend other institutions. Students at for-profit colleges graduate with an average debt of $33,000. At public universities, the average was $20,000. At private nonprofits, the average $27,600. There are very few penalties for schools whose students incur huge amounts of debt and can't repay their loans. More than 3 in 4, that's 76%, of young adults say that college has become harder to afford in the past 5 years. Nearly as many, 73%, say that graduates have more student debt than they can manage. It was interesting with this Occupy movement, which had many different causes in many different cities. The one recurring theme, particularly from the younger people who were there, was we have to do something about student loan debt. Students across America, those who attended colleges and universities, understand that debt and the burden it places on their life. These students have to put off buying homes, starting families, and other major life decisions because of their debt. Sadly, many students are not informed about the loans they're taking out. They don't know the difference between a direct loan and a private loan, but they should. The one critical difference is this, Mr. President. It wasn't that long ago in America where people could borrow money from the federal government to go to college and beyond and then declare bankruptcy. So we changed the law. Said that's not fair. You can't borrow this money from the federal government and then refuse to pay it. So student loans from the government were no longer dischargeable in bankruptcy. I thought there was some sense and justice to that decision. We had cases that were reported of literally students finishing medical school and declaring bankruptcy before they went into practice so they didn't have to pay their student loans. That is unacceptable and unfair. It can no longer be done. Just a few years ago, we changed the law again, and we said that private college student loans, those are loans from the university, not from the government, were also not dischargeable in bankruptcy. What does it mean? It means if you have incurred a debt or if you have signed on your son or daughter's college debt, you're on the hook. You're going to have to pay that off or else. We asked some of the federal agencies, are you concerned about student loan default? And they gave a very cold answer. They said, no, we'll get our money because we'll be watching for the rest of that person's life. Every time they think they're going to receive a federal income tax refund, we'll take the check. And if necessary, we'll take their Social Security checks too. That shows that this debt, this student loan debt, can haunt you for a lifetime. We recently had an email from a young man. It was heartbreaking. He told a story of going to one of the colleges, for-profit colleges in the Chicago area. He ended up coming out of college with $90,000 in debt, a worthless diploma, and no job. His parents signed on the note. Because of the penalties and interest which accumulated after he finished his education, his debt was now up to $124,000. Both of his parents had decided they could no longer afford to retire as they'd planned. They had to keep working to pay off their son's student loan for an education that turned out to be worthless. I wish that was the only example that I knew of, but we have been receiving more and more examples just like it. There is no way in this circumstance for this student to consolidate loans, lower interest rates, or pay off the balance. Sadly, many students are not informed about the loans they take out. They don't know the difference between direct loans and private loans. They don't know this aspect of non-dischargeability in bankruptcy. Private loans are even more burdensome. You see, when you take out a government student loan, after a period of time, because of some of the decisions made by President Obama and by this Congress, you can be at least limited in your exposure how much you have to pay each year, 10% of your income with certain qualifications, 10%, no more. And after 10 years, should you take a job as a teacher or a nurse, some of your student loan government debt can be forgiven. Not true on the private side. The money loaned to you by the school, for example, or by some other institution other than the government is not subject to these benefits or limitations. Students rack up unmanageable amounts of debt and then can't repay their loans or discharge their private student loans in bankruptcy. In September, the Department of Education released the fiscal year 2009 National Student Loan Default Rates. It's a measurement of how many students default on their student loans and gives us a view of the overall burden of college on students. The rates of students attending for-profit colleges continue to soar, well above the rates for students at private and public colleges. 4.6% of students who attend private schools default on their loans, but students who attend for-profit schools default at a rate almost 3.5 times as high, 15%. Dramatically higher if they attend for-profit schools. Because their debt is higher, their likelihood of a job is much less. This says more about the institutions than it really says about the students. Yet there are no repercussions for schools with high default rates unless, under new regulations from this administration, they have 25% default rates for 3 consecutive years. This is unacceptable. The recent GAO study recognizes that we have few measures to determine the quality of education students receive. One measure we do have is that students at for-profits continue to go deeper and deeper into debt, even though most of them don't graduate. Of students who began their education at for-profit schools in the 2003-2004 school year, only 15% had obtained a bachelor's degree by 2009. For-profit schools, over a period of 6 years, 15% graduated. What about other schools? 64% of students at public colleges graduated in that 6-year period of time. 71% at private colleges obtained a bachelor's degree. That is a huge difference. 15% graduation rate at for-profit schools. It means the students, many of them, deeply in debt by a margin of almost 6 to 1, are not graduating, don't end up with a diploma. They have the debt, they have no diploma, and some of them end up with a worthless diploma. The recent Department of Education regulations are starting to work. They're cracking down on aggressive recruiting practices. Students are thinking harder about where they enroll in schools, and in some cases, students are avoiding for-profit colleges. Every high school student in America should read this summary of the Government Accountability Office report on for-profit schools before they even consider enrolling in one of these schools. Some of the schools are starting to ask questions on their own about the way they do business. And many of these schools pleading with me, saying, you're just talking about the bad guys. We're the good guys. Well, prove it. Prove it. Make certain that students are getting an education that's worthwhile. Don't sink them with debt. And stand by them when it comes to finding a job, or at least be mindful what that debt means to their lives. More needs to be done to educate families, high school teachers, and high school counselors about the choices students face. I hope that these companies will continue to examine their practices, and I hope the Department of Education is going to continue monitoring these schools and the way they operate. Let me tell you about one such operation. The Career Education Corporation. I know about this school because their former CEO came and met with me in my office in Chicago and then appeared at a hearing, pleading with me to give special consideration to his for-profit schools, which were different and better and shouldn't be lumped into the category of these schools that are exploiting young people coming out of high school. I listened to him and basically said, well, I'll pay attention to the way this turns out. This gentleman, whose name was Gary McCullough, resigned as the CEO of Career Education Corporation on November 1st after it was reported that his school had misrepresented its placement rates for their graduates. Now, Career Education Corporation is an Illinois-based company with over 100,000 students nationwide. If you've not heard of Career Education Corporation, you may have heard of some of the names of their schools. I saw one of them on a bus in Chicago advertising for more students. And it's a familiar name to people who have followed the culinary side of business for a long time. Le Cordon Bleu. They bought that name, and they named one of their schools Le Cordon Bleu. We will teach you how to be a super chef, an iron chef, whatever chef you want to be. But it turns out they were not only failing to educate and train these students, the students couldn't get jobs, and the students were deep in debt. When Mr. McCullough ended up resigning as CEO of Career Education Corporation, they'd found out that only 13 of their 49 health, education, and art design schools, 13 of 49, met the 65% minimum placement rate for the reporting period. They'd falsified the numbers, and now they're under investigation. They should be. We need to get to the bottom of it. If they are lying to the students, something has to happen. First, they shouldn't be qualified for federal student loans or Pell Grants. If they're not graduating students into jobs, then they ought to be held to higher standards. And the students shouldn't be misled in believing that if you can get a federal loan at a school, it's got to be a good school. Secondly, there's got to be some standard for accreditation. There obviously is little or no accreditation accountability at this point. You can't expect a high school student or his parents to be able to look at a school from the outside or look at the website and decide whether it's any good. There have to be some standards for performance and excellence when it comes to these for-profit schools, for every school for that matter. And finally, if this school loses its accreditation, particularly in the programs where they have failed to graduate the students, I think this school and this corporation should be held accountable for the student loans that have been incurred by these students. They didn't know they were signing up to go to an unaccredited school. Their debt is very real. Their diploma is a phony. So it's time these schools be held accountable. Mr. President, the for-profit schools, I'm sure there are many that offer good education, but there are certainly many that are exploiting students today. They are so good at marketing. You can't avoid them. Whether it's on the internet or on television, they're everywhere, everywhere you turn, particularly in low-income communities. They are offering, quote-unquote, college to many students who can't get into a normal school, a regular college or university. These students feel like finally they're going to get their chance. Little do they know that all these for-profit schools are looking for is the money that they can bring to them. When it's all over, they're deep in debt with no job and no place to turn. What's our responsibility? Remember, we put $132 billion a year into federal aid to education, to higher education. It is time for us to make sure that the schools that receive them for the students are real schools, graduating students, preparing them for a good life and a good job. Mr. President, I ask consent that the statement I'm about to make be placed in a separate part of the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, excuse me, I see the senator from South Dakota is here. Is it all right for me to continue with this statement at this time? Or if you're... I thank you. I'll try to be brief. I thank the senator from South Dakota. Mr. President, experts blame credit default swaps and collateralized debt obligations for the financial crisis. The fact is, these complicated financial products were based on mortgages sold to families who couldn't afford them, credit cards with hidden fees, and loans targeted to low-income individuals with up to 400% interest rates. The financial regulators ignored their responsibility to protect consumers from these predatory practices. Because there was not one regulator solely responsible for consumer protection, the financial regulators pointed their fingers at the other guy when the system collapsed. Consumers lost $17 trillion in household wealth and retirement savings almost overnight. That's why a bipartisan group of 60 senators voted last year to consolidate consumer protection authority under one agency, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The CFPB was given new responsibilities to oversee non-bank actors who deal in payday loans, prepaid cards, student loans, and credit reporting. 200 million Americans rely on credit reporting agencies when they make a big purchase, sometimes when they apply for a job. An estimated 20 million people use payday lenders to make ends meet. I wish they didn't, but they do. Many of them face up to 400% interest rates to obtain these short-term juice loans. 4 million Americans have prepaid debit cards. As more companies use this product instead of checks or direct deposit, it's expected that over $670 billion will be loaded into prepaid cards in the next few years. More than $10 billion in private student loans are given to students who then face up to 15% interest rates. I talked about a few of them in an earlier statement. Tens of millions of Americans relying on non-banks for their financial needs will go without protection unless the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has the resources it needs to help American consumers and a director. Earlier this year, President Obama nominated Richard Cordray to be director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He was recruited to lead the enforcement division and now is being asked to move up and take over the directorship. Before joining, he served as Ohio's Attorney General, recovering billions of dollars of pension funds on behalf of retirees and taking on the predatory lenders. Mr. Cordray saw firsthand how the failure to enforce federal consumer protection laws related to mortgages affecting Ohio residents. He has a strong grounding working with both consumer advocates and the financial sector. He's an excellent choice, and I strongly support his nomination. Unfortunately, Mr. Cordray is asking to head up a consumer protection agency, which, to paraphrase a former colleague on the floor, the banks hate like the devil hates holy water. The idea that we would give authority to an agency to watch these financial institutions, payday loan operations, and the rest to make certain that they don't exploit American consumers drives these banking interests wild. They've done everything they can to stop him from becoming director and to cut the money available for his bureau. They don't believe there should be consumer protection. Let the buyer beware. They don't care at the end of the day if innocent people suffer across America, but they should. My colleagues claim there won't be any real checks on his power if Mr. Cordray is given this position. But he's subject to an annual audit by the GAO, has to report to Congress biannually, is subject to private sector independent audit, monitored by the Inspector General of the Federal Reserve, required to annually audit, the Comptroller General is required to annually audit the financial transactions of the Bureau, and it's subject to the Regulatory Flexibility Act, the Paperwork Reduction Act, Congress Review Act, and the Administrative Procedure Acts, to name a few. The Financial Stability Oversight Council, that includes members from across the financial sector, can review and overturn CFPB regulations. No other agency is subject to having regulations under its own jurisdiction overturned. But that isn't enough for the special interests that hate the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. These are the same players that helped create the financial crisis which devastated our economy. Despite all these measures to ensure congressional oversight, those who couldn't kill the CFPB outright are determined to destroy its ability to act. And now, as we finally start to recover from this economic crisis, the same special interests are protesting efforts to require the disclosure of credit card fees, for example. The same banks that made billions from selling homes to families that couldn't afford them are refusing to modify mortgages so families can stay in their homes. They don't want to change the structure of the CFPB. They want to destroy its ability to protect America's consumers and families. They want to go back to the days of heads I win and tails you lose, back to the days that we didn't have to worry about a regulator enforcing consumer protection laws. The CFPB structure is similar to other financial regulators. Office of the Comptroller of the Currency has been led by one individual with congressional oversight for over 100 years, for example. The Federal Housing Finance Agency that oversees Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac is also led by a single director with congressional oversight. Yet both financial regulators have avoided the political outcry we're hearing about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Really what we're seeing, I'm afraid, is a partisan effort to block a well-qualified nominee. Many intelligent, decent, and hardworking Americans volunteer to contribute as appointed public servants. They're well-qualified. Too often these days they can't get through the United States Senate. This has serious consequences on all federal agencies and our judiciary. Yesterday, we saw an incredible, astonishing Republican filibuster of the nomination of Caitlin Halligan to serve on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. The fact of the matter is, those voting against her nomination couldn't come up with a good reason. She had been found by the ABA to be unanimously well qualified. She had an amazing resume, and she was rejected on a filibuster initiated by the Republican side. That is unfortunate. I would just say to my Senate Republican colleagues, I think that Richard Cordray has the background and experience to lead this agency. He should be given a chance. I know that the banks aren't happy that anybody is watching them. These financial institutions, payday lenders, and the rest would rather do their business without anybody looking over their shoulder. Holly Petraeus is the wife of General Petraeus. She's been working with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to stop the exploitation of men and women in military service. She came by my office to talk about what this agency is doing to protect those families. Sadly, some of these families are exploited so badly that they are forced out of the military and have to be discharged. We don't want that to happen. We don't want it to happen to American families who, unsuspecting, find themselves lured into financial arrangements which are totally unfair. Richard Cordray is competent, qualified, and an honorable public servant. He deserves an up or down vote. We're going to have that vote, probably tomorrow, and I hope that he will be confirmed and given an opportunity to lead this important agency. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from South Dakota.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business, and that when I complete my remarks, the Senator from Wyoming, Senator Barrasso, be allowed to follow me.
Without objection.
Mr. President, the President of the United States has said repeatedly that he makes job creation his top priority. He wakes up every morning thinking about what he can do to create jobs, how he can create jobs. And yet we have the greatest shovel-ready project in the country right in front of us. And when it comes to that particular project, for some reason the President is suddenly not interested. Well, I think we have to ask the question is why that is. I think there are probably a number of reasons, most of which have to do with politics and not the economy and not jobs, because clearly this is a subject on which there is no debate when it comes to the job creation potential there, the impact that it would have on the economies of multiple states in our country, what it would do to the issue of energy security. And the project to which I'm referring, Mr. President, is the Keystone XL pipeline. The Keystone XL pipeline is a project that has been under review now for the better part of 3 years. In fact, there have been 2 environmental studies. If you look at all the due diligence that's been done, it's clearly been reviewed, it has been analyzed, it has been studied, it has been scrutinized, and it's gotten to the point now where it's time to move forward, time to make a decision on this. And ironically, and I think sort of surprisingly to a lot of people here recently, the administration said that they're not going to decide this now for 18 months. They're going to put it off for 18 months, interestingly enough, from a timing standpoint, until after the next election. Well, I think it's unfortunate that that's the case because, if your number one priority is job creation, you have one here ready to go today that could be under construction and that would immediately create 20,000 jobs in this country. It would create $7 billion of investment and lots of revenue for state and local governments, many of which desperately need that. And I think of my own state of South Dakota, the Keystone XL pipeline would traverse my state of South Dakota as the oil sands, the oil that comes from the oil sands area up in Canada makes its way down to the refineries in other parts of the country. It comes through South Dakota, and just in our state alone would be about $500 million of economic activity, would mean hundreds of jobs, and as I said before, revenue for lots of state and local governments. This project in my state, like so many states where it comes through where it impacts, there have been a number of opportunities for people to be heard, to get their input made on this. It's been, as I said, going on now for 3 years. And so you finally get to a point where you have to say it is time to make a decision one way or the other. Now, clearly, my view on this is that this is a project that should move forward. But one way or the other, the President of the United States and his administration ought to be acting with some finality on this subject now, not waiting 18 months, not waiting until after the next election because it's politically expedient to do that, but making a decision now. Why is that? Because if it doesn't get done here, that oil from the oil sands area in Canada will go somewhere else, and some other country around the world will benefit from that. It won't be the United States. It won't be refineries here in this country. It won't be the citizens of America who have a good relationship with our neighbor to the north. Canada is our biggest single trading partner. We do about $640 billion of bilateral trade every single year with Canada. It makes a lot of sense if you're thinking about energy security, if you're worried about the dangerous dependence that we have on other countries around the world for our energy needs, that if we're going to get energy, we get it from a country with whom we have a good relationship, a country that is friendly, a country that we do already a tremendous amount of trade with. And so if we don't move forward with this, it is going somewhere, probably to Asia, probably to China. And China will get the benefit, and the citizens of China will get the benefit of this project rather than having the American people benefit from all that this project would entail if we could get it approved here. But we ought to at least make a decision. We got all these things all these discussion in this country, all the rhetoric coming from the other side about how it's so important that we create jobs in this country, and yet the administration seems willing to just disregard that and say we are going to make what is clearly a political decision and put this off for 18 months until after the next election. Well, I think it's interesting to note what some are saying about this, and frankly, even what the President himself has said as recently as last April about the importance of getting energy from countries that are stable and friendly. And I want to quote, this is something the President said. Importing oil from countries that are stable and friendly is a good thing. That is something the President of the United States said as recently as last April. There is a letter that went from 22 congressional Democrats to the President telling him that America needs the Keystone XL pipeline. 22 Democrat members of the House of Representatives weighed in on this issue. We've had Democrat senators here as well that have weighed in with the administration and weighed in publicly and said this is an important project. This is a project that needs to be completed. Well, you even have the labor unions, which traditionally you would think of as part of the President's political base. And what are they saying about this? The AFL-CIO said, for America's skilled craft construction professionals, any discussion of the Keystone XL project begins and ends with the word jobs. That's what the AFL-CIO is saying. The Labor's International Union of North America says not just a pipeline, but it is a lifeline for thousands of desperate working men and women. So you have bipartisan support here in Congress. You have the working people, the organizations in this country who represent working people weighing in, saying this is a project that needs to be approved that would create jobs, that would address some of the economic angst that we're feeling in this country, and here we are faced with this unnecessary delay. Well, we have a piece of legislation, Mr. President, that has 40 co-sponsors here in the United States Senate. It was introduced last week, and many of our colleagues have taken the lead. Senator Hoeven from North Dakota, Senator Johans from Nebraska has been very involved with this, Senator Murkowski, Senator Brasco, who's here on the floor, and others who believe so strongly in the issue of economic growth, job creation, energy security, national security, that we have introduced a bill that would allow this project either, one, to move forward or to have the President provide a rationale for why it won't move forward. Pretty simple, straightforward legislation. 60 days, it would allow 60 days, I think, from enactment of the legislation for a decision to be made about the permit, one way or the other. Either it gets permitted or, on the contrary, the President gives an explanation as to why it shouldn't be permitted. But at least we get a decision made so there's some economic certainty for the people behind this project, the people who are making this investment, about whether or not it's going to go forward. The one thing we hear over and over from small businesses across this country, large businesses, job creators, is we need economic certainty. We can't continue to operate in this complete cloud of economic uncertainty if we're going to put investment out there and create the jobs that go with that investment. Well, 700,000 barrels a day is the equivalent of what we get daily from Venezuela. So we could get 700,000 barrels of oil a day from Canada, a friendly neighbor to the north, or 700,000 barrels a day from Venezuela or any of the other countries around the world from which we import oil, and it just seems so logical and just such a no-brainer for us to be able to trade and to interact and to have this economic relationship with Canada on this particular project. And it does come across, as I said, many parts of the Dakotas and Montana. It will encourage greater oil production, frankly, here in this country as well, because you've got the Bakken Reserve in North Dakota and Montana, which would be able to access, we hope, at some point, this pipeline to get some of their energy to refineries around this country. It is an all-of-the-above energy strategy, domestic energy strategy, more domestic oil, more alternative fuels, more innovation. It's all these things that we need when we talk about energy security, but clearly in this case, for some just unexplained reason, the administration has concluded that this project shouldn't go forward. Well, there was a concern raised earlier on about the state of Nebraska and the route that the pipeline was taking. That issue has been addressed. The leaders in Nebraska, Senator Johans, the governor of Nebraska, have come together behind an alternative route, which I believe was agreeable to the company, to TransCanada. And so you can no longer hide behind that and use that as a shield. And the legislation that we introduced would make, of course, this subject to states' rights, and having states like Nebraska intervene and work with the company to find this alternative route. It also would ensure and require strong economic or strong environmental protections in the legislation. And so that issue is something that the legislation is addressed. But more than anything else, Mr. President, is what it does is it at least forces some action. It at least says we are going to be serious about job creation in this country, or we're not. We are going to support a shovel-ready project that could create 20,000 jobs and start immediately, or we're not. And so all this rhetoric and all the hot air that comes from people here in Washington, D.C. about wanting to create jobs, this is really putting it to the test. This is where you have to put up or shut up when it comes to whether or not you are serious about creating jobs in this country. And so I hope that my colleagues here in the Senate, on both sides of the aisle, because I believe this is a bipartisan issue, will work with us to advance this legislation. There is some thinking that perhaps the House of Representatives, the other body, may include it in some legislation that they send us that could be coming this way in the not-too-distant future. If that is the case, I hope that we will pick that up and act on it, because if we are serious and if we mean what we say about job creation in this country, there is no better way than to put some certainty behind this project. And again, it would be one thing if this hadn't been studied and overstudied and evaluated and analyzed and scrutinized, but it has, over and over again now for the better part of 3 years. 700,000 barrels of oil a day from Canada and the U.S. Bakken region up in North Dakota to U.S. refineries, or 700,000 barrels of oil headed to some other place around the world that will benefit from it. And just as importantly, if not more importantly, 700,000 barrels of oil that the United States will have to import from some other country around the world that perhaps isn't nearly as friendly as our neighbors to the north. Said, this isn't complicated. This is a pretty straightforward issue, and one where I don't think there's anything but support from the states that are impacted by this, anything but support from the leadership, the political leadership at the state level and local levels. And clearly, I mean, I'm not suggesting that there's no project that has unanimous support, and there are people who oppose this as there are people who oppose almost anything that happens in this country. But the huge majority of people, I think, in the states who are impacted by this see this as for what it is, a positive, forward-looking project that would address so many of the important priorities for this country right now: economic growth, job creation, energy security, national security, addressing some of the needs that state and local governments have for additional revenue. All these issues are addressed with regard to this project, and it is mystifying, absolutely mystifying, as to why the President of the United States and his administration would put this decision off until 18 months from now, after the next election, other than purely and simply political reasons and motivations. That is wrong for the American people. It's wrong for this project. It's wrong for jobs. It's wrong for our economy. And I hope that this body, the United States Senate, will take steps to rectify that by putting a date certain out there by which this project is at least acted on, at least decided, at least permitted or not permitted, hopefully permitted, so that these jobs can be created and we can get this economic activity underway in these many states. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I come to the floor today, as I have so many times since the President's health care bill was signed into law, with a doctor's second opinion. And I do that because I practiced medicine in Wyoming, taking care of families from around the state for about a quarter of a century. And when I talk to patients at home, when I talk to people on the street, when I talk to folks all around my state and around the country, what I hear is what they want. What they wanted from a health care law was an opportunity to have care they need from the doctor that they want at a cost they can afford. But what we've gotten in this country through this administration and this health care law is a law that is bad for patients, in my opinion, bad for providers, the nurses and the doctors who take care of those patients, and terrible for American taxpayers. So I come to the floor again with a second opinion today, Mr. President, because I'm thinking about job creation, and we just heard about the Keystone XL pipeline and the opportunity there with the shovel-ready project to get people back to work. And I'm reminded of what former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi claimed after the health care law was passed, and she said that it would create 4 million jobs. She went on to say 400,000 jobs almost immediately. Well, as we all know, Mr. President, that prediction never came true. In fact, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said that the health care law will actually encourage some people to work fewer hours or to withdraw from the labor market altogether. Well, and just this past week when the employment statistics came out, we saw that over 300,000 Americans have withdrawn from the labor market altogether. It is interesting that at about the same time that the health care law was signed, March 2010, Senator Chuck Schumer, New York senator, claimed on Meet the Press that he said, as people learn about the bill, and now that the bill is enacted, he said it's going to become more and more popular. Well, in fact, Mr. President, this health care law is less popular now, today, December 2011, than it was at the time it was signed into law. So we look at all of these predictions that never came true. It's been 20 months. The health care law's popularity remains low. The law is in front of the Supreme Court to deal with the constitutionality of this government going into the homes of American people, telling them they must buy a product. It is clear that Washington Democrats and the President have miscalculated. They made promise after promise to the American people. They asked families, they asked businesses all across the nation to trust them. The President promised that if you like what you have, you can keep it. The American people know that that promise has been broken. The President said that premiums, health care premiums for insurance costs for families would drop by $2,500 per family per year. We now know that the costs have gone up higher than if the law had never been passed in the first place. Week after week, we hear of more unintended consequences within the law, glitches that are found which show additional problems with the law, and additional President's promises being broken. The American people know that they do not like this health care law, and when you ask them, do you think this health care law was passed for you or for someone else, most Americans will tell you that they think it was passed for someone else. So today I want to talk about two specific examples of problems with this health care law and the possible unintended consequences and some of the repercussions of the things that have happened with this health care law. And one has to do with the labor statistics that came out December 2nd of this year. They released updated payroll, employment, and unemployment numbers. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics data actually show that health care employment was up in November. It was up for all the wrong reasons. The problem is that the health care law's excessive mandates and burdensome regulations are prompting the health care industry to create additional administrative jobs, not caregiver jobs. The health care law was supposed to actually work to get more doctors and more nurses and more x-ray techs and physical therapists to take care of patients. But that's not what happened. Now we see that it's administrative jobs that are up, not caregiver jobs. As a matter of fact, the USA Today printed an article, half-page article, and the title was, "Health Care Jobs Grow in Administration." The article actually talked about a New Hampshire hospital, and that hospital, according to the article, was forced to eliminate 5% of its workforce. So you have a hospital eliminating 5% of the workforce after the state cut Medicaid funding last year. So here's a hospital, 5% of the workforce is cut. Many of those workers, nurses and other caregivers. Caregivers, I think of physical therapists, radiation technologists, nurses' aides. Yet, in spite of the fact that they've had to eliminate 5% of its workforce, they're actually still hiring. Well, how can that be? Well, let's listen to what the hospital's Vice President, Mark Whitney, said. He said, quote, he said, "We need to deal with new technology, new services, new regulations, electronic health records, government reporting requirements on quality. A lot of this," he said, is related to the new federal health law. So they're eliminating nursing positions, eliminating positions of caregivers, and hiring more people to push paper. Well, the President and the Democrats in Congress promised their health care law would expand health insurance coverage. Look at what is happening now. More and more people pushing paper. It's interesting that what the President and Democrats did not tell the American people is that the health care law's oppressive mandates, burdensome regulations, would actually cause health care employers to lay off or stop hiring the very health care professionals needed to treat patients. Instead, the health care employers must be hiring more clerks, more administrators, more paper pushers, all in an effort to figure out and then comply with the health care law's rules and mandates. I do not believe that that is the change most Americans wanted when they started to think about health care reform. The second example I'd like to give, Mr. President, is from a column in the Washington Post, December 2nd of this year, just a week or so ago, written by George Will. And the article is titled, "Choking on Obamacare." The article talks about the health care law's crushing insurance mandates and how those influence both small and large businesses in terms of their willingness to actually hire new workers. Because when you have this kind of record unemployment like we're dealing with in this country, you want to have businesses hire more people, get people back to work. That's what makes America grow. That's what helps our economy, putting people back to work. In the article, they use the example of the restaurants, Carl's Jr.'s, Hardee's restaurants. There are about 3,200 of those restaurants around the country, and the company, the parent company, says that they have created about 70,000 jobs, and they want to hire more workers. But the CEO of the company, Andy Pudsner, says that they can't hire more workers because they don't really know how much they will need to spend on health care. They're planning to spend about $18 million on health care, and they say that's just a guess. They're trying to, if you're running a business, you want to be able to figure out what your future costs are going to be, what the expenses are going to be, and you'd rather have a little more predictability than just guessing. But thanks to the health care law's complex formulas and many regulations which have not yet been released, and many of the uncertainties that continue to exist, this is a company that's going to have to guess about how much they'll need to spend on health care. Well, what business can afford to guess what one of their largest costs is going to be? Well, they're guessing they're going to have to spend about twice the amount of money on health care as they did building new restaurants last year. So they talk about building new restaurants, and those are construction jobs and then jobs of the people who work in the restaurants providing services, and they're going to end up spending about twice as much on health care as on building new restaurants. Well, it doesn't take a lot to realize that hindering a company's ability to build new restaurants means fewer available jobs, construction workers, for service suppliers in a struggling economy. The CEO of the company is right when he says that, quote, employers everywhere, he says, will be looking to reduce labor content in their business models as Obamacare makes employees unambiguously more expensive. Well, if we want to spur the economy and economic growth and job creation, Mr. President, Washington must take its shackles off of our job creators. And this is just one more reason why the President's health care law must be repealed and replaced. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. Note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Thank you.